the screen share and then start the record. Oh, you figured out how to do it. All right. Oh, you know what? This is too funny. I can't see my screen. Here we go. Now, are other people still seeing Laura Rose's screen? Or are you
No,
seeing
I'm
Rachel?
I'm seeing
Rachel.
Sorry. Well, so it's going to have to be like that for a minute because I can't read your introductions while you're screen sharing. So I just want to say that Rethinking Psychiatry is really proud to present Pure Galaxy and our tour guides, Laura Rose and Kevin Fitz. And Laura Rose, who is, as you can see, a lady of this one hat and many others, is actually the founder and creator of Pure Galaxy. And she's got a long career of providing creative and technical business services in the public and private sector. I want to say that she's an amazing nonprofit and for-profit, I believe, at times.
You're breaking up.
Uh-oh. I don't know if I can do anything about that. Can you hear me? I'm going to assume
No, just now, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm going to assume you can hear me. Let me know again and I'll pause.
Your screen has frozen.
That's okay. So it'll catch up, I'm hoping. So Laura Rose has provided consulting and run nonprofits and organizations and programs at the local, statewide, national, and even international level. And she's been a dedicated consumer and family advocate. She informs public policy, budgeting, and systems improvement at every level. And I just want to say I have been very, very fortunate to have gotten to spend some time in developing this program with her. And I'm just blown away. I'm so excited. I think you will be too. And then we're also super lucky to have Kevin Fitz, who's been with Rethinking for a long time and has presented before. And we adore Kevin. And he's a bundle of energy, of really, really good energy. He's also the executive director and creator, I believe, of the Oregon Mental Health Consumers Association. He serves on the state of the Oregon Consumer Advocacy Advisory Council, the State of Oregon Addictions and Mental Health Planning and Advisory Committee, the Center for Behavioral Health Advisory Committee, the Multnomah County Adult Mental Health and Substance Abuse Advisory Committee, Council Executive Committee, and a Home for Everyone Coordinating Council. And as if that's not enough, he's generally a sweet and brilliant member of our community. And I just want to say thank you both for being here, and we are super excited.
Great, thank you for having us. So, welcome everybody today. Glad you could join us. We want to give a tour and a discussion on Pure Galaxy and Pure Telehealth. So first off is telling you what is Pure Galaxy and what is the Pure Galaxy calendar. And I believe Pure Galaxy is an evolving, growing community. We have so many wonderful peers, and we wanted to have a place online, a stake in the ground to put together a directory of Oregon's fabulous peers, peer-run organizations, programs with peer-delivered services. And so we started that in October last year, 2019. We had gotten done with waiting for some of the other groups that we were hoping would do that, but they hadn't done that yet. And so we decided it was a good time to get that going. So we did. And as an independent organization, apart from government, et cetera. And so then we had the opportunity to put together the calendar, a Peer Galaxy calendar of phone and online peer support and wellness activities. So we'd been working on the topic of peer telehealth, and we wanted Peer Galaxy not only to be this rich directory, but also to be a portal for having a umbrella collaborative among Oregon peer-run organizations and peer supports to be able to offer peer telehealth while saving costs and overhead. That was really important to us. And so we didn't want each peer-run organization to have duplicate burden putting together peer telehealth. We wanted to make it smooth and easy. So anyway, that was part of our start. A question is, who's the Peer Galaxy calendar for? So the calendar itself has become this resource full of online peer support, peer warm lines, peer telehealth activities, special events, and more. And so who is it for? So we've said it's for anyone seeking recovery from whether it's pandemic stress, emotional distress, grief, mental health, addictions, co-occurring substance use challenges, and or trauma. So we want Peer Galaxy to be your online portal to peer support and wellness activities. And one of the first things we do on the web page is we describe what is peer support. For me, I put peer support as connecting with an individual having lived experience who can listen, understand, relate to, and grow with us wherever we are at in our journey. That is what we call peer support. And we also have been including wellness activities. What is wellness? We have a beautiful definition from UC Davis 2020 this year. Wellness is an active process of becoming aware of and making choices towards a healthy and fulfilling life. Wellness is more than being free from illness. It is a dynamic process of change and growth. Broad activities offerings included but are not limited to breath work, guided art, movement, dance, chair yoga, meditation, music, Tai Chi, and more. Our goal for Peer Galaxy's calendar is to offer access in real time to a menu of offerings for peer support and wellness activities within reach where you are, when you need it, around the clock, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, free, or in some cases, pay as you can or sliding scale, but definitely the focus is on events that are free for access for everyone.
So amazing.
So I wanted to take a moment and share a couple of quotes that I found really inspiring about galaxies and our galaxy. And I love this, I just put these together. Ambitious travelers, we are constellations, we are made of stardust, we are connected. And I really like this one. Dean Wilson, World Waker, said, a quote, "His eyes were like galaxies, and everyone could get lost in them. How many stars flickered there? No one knew. But every time he glanced upon someone, a new star ignited. A new star was caught in the gravity of his stare." Another quote from Melody Lee Moon Gypsy, "She's a galaxy of bright hues, and her heart contains a universe of love. She is starlight." There's another one, Oksana Rus, I'm not sure if I'm saying her name correctly or his name, but it says, "At the end of the day, we are anchoring into the peaceful lagoon, smiling at the majestic sun and its flirting rays, slowly slipping into the glittering ballroom of immense night skies, sipping on the platinum moon, under the blues of rippling waves, kissing my golden foot, hanging over the board of gently rocking boat, diving into the bed of galaxies, whispering magical stories of their eternal lives, connecting souls till the dawn. I think for so many folks, nighttime has been a challenge where there's nobody hardly to connect with oftentimes. And it's a time when people often struggle alone with their thoughts and, reflections on what happened during the day, or sometimes just nighttime in and of itself is a challenge for different reasons. And so we really want to have a place where people can go and they can find connection. And it's wonderful that there are some really great opportunities online around the clock. And so that's part of what we're bringing together with Peer Galaxy. There's another quote: "I look at the wonders of the sky and see myself among the stars. Even a small group of people can change the galaxy." By Chuck Wendig, Aftermath. So thank you for letting me share those. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about peer telehealth and what we've been up to at the Oregon Consumer Advisory Council. We were talking about peer telehealth as a group. We have committees on the Oregon Consumer Advisory Council, one of which is Tools, Technology, and Access. That was started a couple of years ago when we got together. It was a priority area. And so we have quite a few members on that committee, including Kevin Fitz, myself, Mark Fisher, and others. And so we were working on priorities in that committee, of which peer telehealth is a huge one. And so around January 24th, we were able to put together recommendations and get that to the state of Oregon, Oregon Health Authority. And we said there's a priority of a need for peer telehealth to be supported. We worked on a document, I think we had a one-pager that went into a policy option package, and then we had about a 20-pager with the background information that we had pulled together on best practices, ethics, conferences, many different aspects. And so what we have done is we've put together a page on the Peer Galaxy website that's called Peer Telehealth Resources List. We wanted to show people where to go, how to start up one of these online groups if need be. There's even some funding for the telehealth work, and so there's a lot on there. But I have to say, nothing could have accelerated it faster than necessity when COVID-19 hit. So Kevin, do you want to share a little more about our work on Oregon Consumer Advisory Council?
Yeah, sure. So for people who may not be familiar, the Oregon Consumer Advisory the Oregon Consumer Advisory Council is a 25-member council of individuals who identify with lived experience, something under the behavioral health umbrella, whether they're in recovery from addiction and alcoholism, problem gambling, identify having some sort of mental health challenge or whatsoever. So 25 individuals across the state of Oregon by proxy to advise the Oregon Health Authority director on behavioral health issues. So 3 years ago, during our yearly planning retreat, a very savvy and creative thinker kept bringing up to us why our council, compared to other councils under the roof of OHA, didn't seem to have parity when it came to technology and access and technological support, et cetera. And then some other things came up, and then we moved forward the idea of why don't we take this opportunity to rename and reform some of our committees. And out of that growth was the Tools, Technology, and Access. And it's had a twofold purpose. One, what are the tools and technology and access that advocates, activists, peer system change agents need to be successful at what they're doing? And then also two, I don't know if we've done it completely half and half, but we've also looked at what about those individuals who aren't involved in system activities or peer service delivery, but they are customers of the Oregon Health Plan and they have behavioral health issues? And so we've looked at issues of the federal government that gives a basic smartphone to people who are on food stamps or on Medicaid. And then we've also looked at an Oregon entrepreneur who developed an app called Connected to look at self-monitoring and check-in about what's going on with your state of mind, and many other things. But one of the things that's been profound as we've been, I'm the co-chair of it with another gentleman named Mark Fisher. One of the things that we found when we put this when they put this committee forward is to start becoming aware and lengthening our radar and our awareness of what's going on exactly in telehealth, what is on the landscape. And then particularly, we had the acting deputy director of behavioral health. He's now not in that role anymore, but a gentleman named John Collins gave us a very informative 40-minute discussion with our committee about where is telehealth in the state of Oregon, where is the direction coming from the state of Oregon's behavioral health department for what it looks like and what they want to see. And the thing that was very illuminating out of it, he gave some examples of some things that are happening in Eastern Oregon and some movement towards telepsychiatry. And it's also crucial. Well, I always want you to remember when we're talking about telehealth, or we want to make sure that we expand that just beyond telepsychiatry. The moneyed groups had been to the table faster, and that. And it, not to say anything against telepsychiatry, but there's a whole wide array of other things and opportunities within telehealth service delivery that need to be talked about. And one of those is the ones that we care about primarily. That's an engagement of the consumer for a better experience in your clinical and supports and services, and giving the advocate and the activist the tools so they can participate equitably in their bid to change the system to more progressive and humane. And so to that end, we put together, and I should say, Laura Rose didn't mention it, she is currently the chair of the Oregon Consumer Advisory Council. And one of the things that was manifest that we did this year, and we got our ducks in a row, is trying to understand since government in Oregon is funded on a 2-year process, every state agency has, and Laura could tell me what the exact definition is, but there's a timeline of you need to get your wish list into the director of your programs to bring it up to your executive agency head. And he looks across that and says, I'll bring this one forward. I will not bring this one forward. And so we knew somewhat about the process, the calendar dates, and the moving chairs of directors within OHA Behavioral Health made it very difficult for us to get our timeline matched up with theirs to make sure we bet those deadlines. Though the thing that was really worth bringing up here clearly is this year was the first time that we, under the deadline, had all our ducks in a row. Laura marshaled all the committees, beyond tools, technology, and access, to make sure that we had our recommendations solid, clear, and we could present it at a one-pager to the director of Oregon Health Authority. Said, this is our 4 things that we want you to bring forward. And one of those things that's remarkable, and I think it will probably have the longest legs of anything that we put forward. And there's some pretty other cool stuff that we put forward that I'm very excited about, like peer respite. But the growth of telehealth and what the interim deputy director said, it's the wild, wild west. There's not a whole lot of stuff nailed down, and particularly in the area of consumer services and peer connections, there is a lot of opportunity. And so I'm so proud that we got that telehealth proposal in. Fast forward, do you want me to tell them the genesis of how we ended up at May 1st with the next 90 days ahead of them? What happened there? Or should we save that for later?
Well, I'll just add a couple real things and then we can go to that if that's okay.
Sure.
I would like to add that we had invited guests to come and talk with us, one of whom was Kathy Britton, who is now the president director for the Telehealth Alliance of Oregon. We've also had other guests like Karen Fortuna, who's out of New Hampshire, Dartmouth University. She runs a program for digital peer support. She's doing research projects and writing. She recently joined INAPS, the International Association of Peer Supporters. And so we learned and talked about the history of telehealth, and many times they use the term telemental health for some of these specific projects. But I want us to be conscious about specifically talking about peer telehealth. So it's, you know, by peers, for peers, peer driven, peer led. That's a piece that is missing in so many cases. They did pass some laws. Part of, you know, who pays for telehealth, how does it become sustainable is a huge question. And so the laws have been evolving and unfolding. A year ago, like last July roughly, they had passed a federal piece of legislation that allowed for telehealth to be billed for people with co-occurring disorders because they knew how bad the opium crisis is. So they were loosening the requirements so more people could access the telehealth, but they haven't done that yet the same way, at least not before COVID, for mental health and for general purposes. There were still all these restrictions for getting reimbursement or payment through those sources. So, you know, we're working to try to educate and promote and just clarify for folks, you know, what it is, what it can do, the opportunities, how it's needed. For someone like myself, it's I would say it's essential. I have mobility issues. I have transportation issues because of my health condition. And so as much as they want someone like me to go out in the community and go have a meeting, be part of other support groups in the community or drop-in centers or social networking, all that great, wonderful stuff, with my health considerations, that's just not a possibility. So being able to access peer support in the richest format possible, that's part of what peer telehealth is. And so we want to make that available. There's so much good that can come from it. You know, talk about the behavioral health workforce and the need for peer supporters to have opportunities. A lot of people in our state have been trained and even certified in peer support, and yet they haven't had an opportunity to, you know, go to work full time in that. But with the option of telehealth, a lot more people can engage and work from home, have flexible hours, have the accommodations that they need. I just think there's so many positive benefits. We're just scratching the surface. But thanks, I wanted to share those pieces. And I love that Oregon has been a leader in telehealth back since some of the earliest projects in 1999, Eastern Oregon, rural, and here we are again today, still trying to blaze the trail. So thank you. Let's talk about accessibility a little bit and then talk about the when we were talking about the digital divide is another piece. I just want to share that the Telehealth Association of Oregon, Kathy Britton, who came and talked with our group, they were working very, very hard on expanding broadband, but she gave a story that's hard to forget. She said there was a situation in a rural county. The young child couldn't even do the school homework without going to a McDonald's to get Wi-Fi. That's how hard it is, you know, just to engage at the same level for education in this day and age. And so that left quite an impression on my heart. And they have been working hard. I think there were several legislative bills to establish some infrastructure around broadband telehealth work going on in our state. But it just, with all the things that have happened with the legislature, like this session didn't complete this year, the legislative session was cut short. A lot of good things didn't have a chance to cement or get passed. And so anyway, that's just a piece of context. Go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, so speaking of that, so there were things that were going on late winter in February connected to the legislative session. And as Laura Rose said, that got kind of sandbagged and temporarily put off. And one of the things that it was interesting because how that influenced the change of what some people, let me just explain. Sometimes people tell me, I've had mental health directors say, God, you are so focused on one thing. Is that all you think about? Like people have said over the last 3 or 4 years, is all you think about is peer respite or whatever. And for 2 or 3, well, probably about 2 months, I had been working on another project to get some funding for a peer event in Eastern Oregon. And then legislative session cratered and went into paralysis. And then we started hearing terms of what was this term that was very new to me. It was on a Sunday morning in mid-February, a term called social distancing. And they were talking about its impact and how that related to this virus that was discovered in China, how that was going to start impacting culture and society. And then I was doing some homework over the weekend, reviewing some of the papers and some of the documents. And one of those documents was and I don't know exactly, it was roughly 30 pages with citations and just an amazing piece of work. The presentation, one of the 4 I was talking about earlier, one of the things that this council submitted to the director of Oregon Health Authority was this Telehealth Initiative. And I was looking through that, thinking about what is an opportunity that could be fast-tracked with this. And I have ongoing conversations with the administration of Oregon Health Authority. And they're somewhat pedestrian and off the record, where I just share thoughts, hopes, dreams, ambitions, and sort of frank talk. And I value that opportunity. And I was thinking about, what are we moving into? I'm not really sure what we're moving into, but if the predictions of these ideas of social distancing and community voluntary sort of stay-at-home orders, what does that mean for the opportunities that exist for us and does not exist for us? So I started having this idea of pushing this telling the director and the administrator of the Oregon Health Authority, please take a look at this telehealth initiative. If I had my druthers, I would like you to fast forward this whole project and fund it all now so we can get on the ground going forward. We have a revenue positive and good there. So and wasn't exactly sure what that might look like. And so then started thinking about some of the things that I learned about how there's 3 different steps, and maybe it's more, but there are at least 3 different steps in what's called a solo contract, where a contracting agency, a government, a municipality has the ability to give a solo contract. And there's different mathematics involved. Like in the state of Oregon, roughly, the first step is anything below 10 grand. And then I think it goes up to 150 grand and then beyond. And it has certain commitments. But so in my brain, I was thinking, what could be done with the authority of one agent, one Oregon Health administrator acting without having to bring it into a community RFP and invite multiple vendors that could happen quick? What would that look like? And then started thinking about that. And then I started talking to Laura Rose, if we could do this, what might that look like? And could you start thinking about a potential draft or proposal that if you were good on it, that I would use my connection and my relationship to informally try to educate the administrator about the value of it and also about why it needed to be expedited. So we had a conversation. Laura got me the proposal. I think it was on a Friday night, she got me the proposal. I connected it to the administrator on Saturday morning, and we had 10 or 20 text messages back and forth about defining, one of the things that we suffer from, and just a brief aside, is that not everybody understands our vocabulary. And that's not a bad thing necessarily, but when we talk in words like PSS and CRMs, even our larger behavioral health system managers are somewhat flummoxed at not understanding what we're talking about. And so part of that was breaking it down, trying to explain what it was and why a calendar fast-tracked and getting initial support from them would be crucial in this time. So anyway, so like I said, I sent him a copy of that on Saturday morning. He got back to me Sunday afternoon. He said, I'm going to green light this. I'm going to go ahead and I will CC you and we'll send it on to the deputy director, and you and her can connect about this, and there we go. And so that was very exciting. And then the next step became the work of, the mechanics of putting out a contract, and like Laura Rose, writing up, the scope of work and the expectations and all of that. So, and I was very pleased that now this was before COVID really landed on Oregon, but his thought of makes sense to me. Why haven't we done this before? This doesn't exist. And yes, and it didn't come in a conversation of criticizing his behavioral health team, just saying, and Laura Rose and I were talking about this earlier. I have some contacts at the National Association of Mental Health, State Mental Health Program Directors. And as far as I know, and anybody that I know that exists in the world of peer and consumer technical assistance, no state has something that aims to be as comprehensive and be a meta clearinghouse of information that this calendar currently lays out. And I imagine the trajectory of its growth is going to be it's going to be hypersonic. So anyway, so I'm very excited that happened, and they trusted, Laura Rose and her work. This was created, like she said, in October. And I think this just added gas to the project. So I'm very excited about it, and there is no person that I would ever want to, nobody that I know in the universe, at least here in the Northwest, that I would be so excited about, trying to help broker expedited support and funding for projects that Laura Rose is associated with, just because she's brilliant, and she must think like a database, and an actuarial and insurance agent. I mean, she's got amazing skills for the project that Peer Galaxy is, and I'm so proud that she's my friend and she's leading that project. So, thanks.
Thank you, Kevin. I'm going to share my screen, if that's okay. And so, let's take a tour of the Peer Galaxy calendar. So the website for it is peergalaxy.com. And then you can go to the main webpage at peergalaxy.com on your phone or on your tablet or your computer. And it has a welcome message. And if you're on a phone, sometimes they have what's called a hamburger on the left side. It's like what you would use to get to the main navigation menu that we have here that has home, calendar, COVID-19 resources, join stars list, share ideas, telehealth, and timeline. So that's on the main page. And then we have some links. You can either take a text link to go to the Peer Galaxy calendar, which is highlighted, or you can click on the word calendar on the navigation menu. Or if you just want the web address, and we can put that in the chat box, it's peergalaxy.com/calendar. So this is version 1.0. This is our starting version. And what we wanted to do is get the events in here as fast as possible to let people know what was available in terms of online meetings, telephone warm line support, anything that they would need during this time. And the way the calendar loads on the main page, it has a bunch of features on it that we'll talk about for looking at it with different formats. For example, the main view when you see it is called the agenda view, but you can look at it like a monthly calendar, a day calendar, a week calendar, things like that. And so it starts with the current day, and then at the top we have the SAMHSA Disaster Distress Hotline, has a multilingual 800 number. Underneath that, we start other all-day events, which basically what happens is we're fortunate we have groups like Dual Diagnosis Anonymous or Alana Club of Portland, GAM Talk, Hey Peers, Hearing Voices Network, Pacific Rim, and quite a few others. And so those, when you click on them or select them, they'll open up and there's links so you can access. Those ones that are marked all day usually have meetings going on throughout the day, 7 days a week most of the time. And so when you click on them, those links are available. You can see how to get to those events. I try really hard to include links to the Facebook page if I have information about what the nonprofit is, other pieces of information that might be relevant, those kinds of things. And we also do something called tagging events. And so when you tag an event, you get to assign a keyword to it or a bunch of keywords to it. And so people can have different ways of finding those events in addition to just looking at a chronological calendar. And so there's a option drop-down menu called tags on the left. And so there's a lot of keywords in there that you might see, things like art, anxiety, balance, belonging, book club, breathing, chair yoga, grief, COVID-19. So if you click on one of those, then it'll open up the events that are connected with that particular keyword that have been labeled. So that's an additional feature. I'm going to switch screens for a minute and go to the...
Just want to add, the coolest thing is if you go to Google and you put in Peer Galaxy, either one word or two words, the first thing that comes up on Google is the Peer Galaxy calendar. I think that's pretty awesome.
Cool. Yeah, we've been blessed on that. We haven't done a lot of work yet. We're on the search engine optimization. We're just starting that piece of it, but it's cool that it's coming up and it'll be really helpful. I think it'll be coming up in more categories, more searches. Like we've made our key phrase online peer support and peer telehealth, things like that. So when people go searching, hopefully they'll find this. Looking at this, so one of the things I wanted to mention too, we were able to add a accessibility toolbar feature. So in the upper right corner, when you're looking on the device, you should have a sort of hot pink purple button that has an image of a wheelchair access. And if people click on that, what it'll do is it'll open up some of the accessibility options that help people, whether they want to change the font, they need to magnify, look closer, if they need to work with their screen reader. There's different features in there, changing contrast for some people, white text on dark or dark text on white or dark text on light blue might be easier for someone. So it has a lot of features for accessibility. We also just added, although it's not in this slideshow, we added Google Translate. And so now if you go to the main web page and there's a purple button in the lower right corner, it'll show, if you click on it, like I think over 100 different languages, countries, flags. The flags are alphabetical, except for the US flag is the first one for English. It's not perfect, but it's better than nothing, and it has a lot of languages that it accommodates. So it was really nice to be able to just click it, and all of a sudden all the menus and the text is changed to Spanish, for example, or other languages, Vietnamese, Russian, you name it. So
Laura
that's,
Rose, I'm sorry, where did you say that is? Is that part of the accessibility drop-down menu?
nope, let me go back to the live screen share for a second. I hope it's okay. I'm gonna go back here, 1 second. Okay, so I'm back to a live screen, and down here there's this translate button, and if you click on it in the lower left corner, you'll see these flags come up.
Wow. Okay.
And then so I'm trying to find, like, one of them is for probably I was looking for Mexico. I'm probably missing it right now. Click on something else, Icelandic or something. Anyway, so when you click on it, it'll usually change the language that you see, and then you can change it back to English. So anyway, so that's just an extra feature now for these events. I'll go back to the presentation. Here's the accessibility button, and it offers color adjustments, like we said, and navigation adjustments. Great stuff. Bigger cursor, better printing, all that great stuff. So anyway, we appreciate that. That's a feature from a company called Accessiby. There's a few other companies out there that have tools for enhancing website accessibility. So that's the one we're using right now. And then back to the presentation.
So, Laura Rose, I just want to let you know that you're getting a lot of comments about like how awesome this demonstration is and things. And I'm also curious if you want to be side by side, have a image of you and then the screen, or when you share the screen, or if you just want the screen to be bigger. We can make it either way.
Either way, it's fine as long as people can see the screen.
Screen bigger would be best, like it is now currently. That's
Okay.
good to see it.
Okay, great. We also added a timeline, and so if people click on that, you can see a little bit of the history where we're putting some of the highlights in. One of the things that was fantastic, so partnering with Mental Health Association and Addiction Association of Oregon, Janie shared with me that there was an upcoming TV show, an interview going to be done with several folks, including Kevin Fitz. We were able to invite Kevin Fitz, and he was able to share about Pure Galaxy for KGW News, which is NBC in Portland. And then they put in together an article, like a news article, right around the same time, the first of the month of May, on their website. And so that brought a lot of people to Pure Galaxy. I've also heard since then from several members of the community that they have either seen newsletters or flyers or other occurrences where Pure Galaxy has been mentioned. And we're really excited because almost all of this is just simply organic through people sharing and word of mouth so far. But obviously we want to really promote the website to help as many people find it and get access to it as possible. There's also been some very large events that have pivoted to the online. So we had several conferences coming to Oregon this year, regional conferences like Northwest Regional Telehealth Resource Centers, which partnered with Telehealth Association of Oregon. And they ended up doing their conference entirely online. And so when they did that, they waived all the registration fees or refunded them. People from over 43 states were able to attend. I think they had at least 200 people, if not more. It was a fantastic, like 3 or 4 day conference. Then they had the American Association of Suicidology. Their conference went online as well. And Pure Apocalypse is an annual conference that was scheduled to happen in April. That got pushed back until July, and it looks like that's also pivoting to virtual. So that's a big, big change. With the COVID-19, we put together a COVID-19 specific resource list. There's a lot of different categories of help for folks that we've been able to list in there. The main two at the top start out giving general information about the coronavirus, COVID-19, such as the governor's announcements for different phases of reopening, executive orders, a lot of information, CDC, World Health Organization. Underneath that, there's a link specifically for other resource locator websites. Portland Street Roots worked with others, and they came out with a beautiful listing of resources. Rose City Resource Finder, that's under there. We also have health and medical, food, housing, utilities, help paying bills, farmer, farm worker, rural community resources, corrections, Oregon State Hospital, PSRB, reentry, juvenile justice, community integration, child welfare, foster families, foster care, peer support, crisis support, therapy support, grief and anticipatory grief and bereavement. I was amazed how many wonderful resources that are available even across the world. So again, sometimes when it's not convenient to attend an event or it's at a later hour of the night, sometimes when it's happening in a different part of the world, you know, it might be daytime to them where it's nighttime to us. That's a really awesome option. We also have a lot of folks that have had to transition to homeschooling or having digital learning at home. So there's information on there. Pets, animals, assistance dogs, credit cards. I found credit card companies, they had different links and offers to work with people with debt management through the crisis. A lot of businesses and organizations stepped forward. A lot of foundations stepped forward to put together special funding. So this is a rich resource list. I kind of think of it as like a meta list because it's a resource list of other resource lists too. There's also some very cultural specific resources. For example, there's a group that is offering up to 5 sessions of therapy for free to members of certain populations that really need help right now. There's also special resources for our first responders. So thanks for letting me share all that. So we have that, and then we have also, I mentioned the Peer Telehealth resource list, and so we've got quite a few categories in there. We did start the Oregon Peer Telehealth Information Network. So every day, it seems like more and more information is coming out about telehealth, whether it's apps that are coming out, whether it's changes in law, legislation, new technology tools. A lot of the technology tools like Doxy.me offer a free edition, those kinds of things. So we put all that information on this page called Peer Telehealth Resource List. You can click on any of the items and it opens up with more links and resources. We even have some quotes in there, historic documents, things like that. So, and then on the calendar, back to the calendar, there's a couple of events that require advanced registration, such as a ticket. However, most events are free or sliding scale. So if they are asking for registration, it's probably because they want to add you to their mailing list, or sometimes they only have a certain number of seats available. So they, will give it first come, first serve. So if you see a little ticket sign to the right of any of the events, that's what that is. Let's see, what else did we have in here? You click to open an event. I showed the tags, the different views, the agenda, the day, the month, and the week. The ones, if you were to look at like the week one, here we have the week of May 31st. It's just solid filled all throughout the day. So that's why we ended up going with the agenda view. It's a little bit easier for readability. You can pick any date in the calendar, so you could go back. We've had a couple times where either an event might have been canceled, but yet, or they made a recording of an event that you might have missed. And so you can go back in time and look at the date that the event originally occurred on. And if there's a recording, we've added that link into the event when possible. We might be short a few of those, but that's what we're doing. So a lot of events should have that. Another feature is you can subscribe or export these events. So you can add them to your Google Calendar, Apple Calendar, Outlook, or export to XML. That's on the lower right of the screen, a little button called subscribe. We also were just able to add a search feature. So that came a little bit later, but that's working somewhat now. You can search through, for example, one of the nonprofits, Recovery Outreach Community Center, has a lot of events, and including chair yoga that I love to attend. And so you can type up ROCC and hit search, or it'll drop down what's in there, and then you can search for it. And so it'll bring the events up that are relevant to that, and then you can click in to get information about those events. The search is not working yet for the telehealth resource list or for the COVID-19 list. So we're still working on that in the background, but it does work for the event calendar and for the general website. So we've had some wonderful visionary community partners. we've been doing training for folks on how to enter events. So we have people that have volunteered from Folk Time, Project Able, a couple of other organizations that are helping out with the entry on these events. Oregon Health Authority was part of the funder, and we're working with them to get the word out. Oregon Consumer Survivor Coalition, Peer Support Solutions, Oregon Mental Health Consumer Association, Mental Health Association of Oregon. All of these organizations have been working with us and helping. We also want to thank our dedicated champions. We have a Facebook group. If folks are interested in any part of the development of Peer Galaxy, they're welcome to sign up and join that group, or email me directly and we can stay connected through email. And we have our shining stars, all of the organizations and individuals offering peer support. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. You are the shining stars, and I'm just so grateful we have so many offerings. I can't wait to tell you what we have. We also have our visitors, and I like to call them our Destiny Voyagers, and our digital pivoters, residents, tourists, and guests. This is a portal, and I think of it like a dock to the rest of the universe. We have a few quotes that people have shared testimonials, saying Peer Galaxy is a win, satisfying an unmet need through this easy access, utilitarian digital resource, a win for Oregon State mental health reform advocates at the Oregon Consumer Advisory Council, a win for all persons wishing to quickly access peer support for mental health and other concerns. I've also been amazed, I'm learning more and more about the network of organizations and resources, and especially, for example, in the interest of gambling, there were so many, and so Rose had thanked us for that as well, Rose Kunow. So our web traffic in May, we had tripled from the baseline in April, over 3 times as much web traffic. We reached just under 250,000 hits, over 90,000 pages were viewed, or page views, and then this says 8,000 visits. I went back because this was a couple days early. We actually got 9,000 visits in May. So our first real operational month for the calendar. We counted all the impressions, so including people sharing about it through Facebook, through newsletters, live events, over 74,000 impressions getting the word out in May. So we're off to a great start. And the total number of offerings, like if you were able to go to an event online, you know, sometimes these events are every day. Some of the events are twice a week, once a week, weekends, whatever. So each day was counted as an offering. We had 6,878 offerings on the calendar in May from 53 event sources, including the 13 telephone peer support warm lines operating some operating 24/7. We had peer support programs, including both mental health and addictions recovery, plus 21 hours of peer support for peer supporters that was offered. So many groups stepped up. We had 37 webinars and talk series, lots of topics, COVID-19 and more. And we had 9 wellness activity programs that offered over 1,700 hours of access to wellness activities. A few of these offer recordings, so and a few of them just have events all throughout the day, like different parts of the country, different instructors or leaders providing an event, but it's covered 24/7. And of course, we had the National Disaster Distress Hotline. We put a few charts together to show the growth. So we went from 452 online and phone addictions recovery peer support meetings in April to over 2,716 in May. And then for mental health recovery and wellness peer support, we went from 685 in April to almost 2,000 in May. The peer support for peer supporters, it went down from 38 offerings to 21, but part of that is because they started doing one-on-one meetings rather than the group meetings as much, so that went down a little bit. And then finally, the wellness activities, we only had 45 in the calendar in April, and now it had over 1,754 at the end of May. We also looked at the number of organizations that were offering these online activities. We went from 6 in April for addictions and 16 peer support in April to 16 addictions groups in May and 29 for wellness, mental health recovery, peer support. And our wellness activities, we increased from 5 different organizations offering to 9. Telephone peer support, we had 9 warm lines, but by May we had 13, and we went from 2 webinars in April to 23 in May. So we're going to keep developing, we're going to promote and share, we're going to keep mapping and adding events. We have a lot of events to get in that calendar. We could really use more volunteers. I feel almost like my heart breaks every time I look at the list. It's like, I just want everything in there real time so fast because there's, you know, so many great offerings. I would hate for people to miss it, especially the more specialized offerings that are coming along to really address needs such as bilingual support for suicide prevention and much more. We will be upgrading features and working on search engine optimization so people can find it. We're working on our stakeholder relations and collaboration. We really want to help it fit the framework: simple, responsive, and meaningful. We have ongoing training. I'm putting together some documents with step-by-step instructions for adding events and maintaining the calendar and growing the vision. So the calendar is one piece of the Peer Galaxy project and community, but that's what we're focused on here today. Thank you. So Kevin asked a question we could talk about. What does digital support look like in your universe? So we'd love to open it up for questions.
And so people could respond in the chat or unmute yourself and we can have a discussion. But if you unmute yourself and you speak, you'll be recorded. Just know
Thank
that.
you.
We had a question in the chat. I'm going back to it. Let's see, what was it? The question was, can the events be tagged or show which languages can in real time get translations or interpretations?
So the events could be tagged. We are using tags now. So they could be tagged for which languages are available.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure fully of all the tools yet. You know, we're learning as we go, but I know there's, you know, different services for closed captioning, for example, and other kinds of things. So those bits of information are being added to the peer telehealth resources list as we find them.
Great.
I have a few questions or a few provocative questions for folks. So, and Laura Rose, I'm not mathematics and exact count, but let's just say approximately in the state of Oregon has certified through its traditional health workers program upwards of 5,000 individuals, both on the both who are certified recovery mentors, peer support specialists, peer wellness specialists. So roughly, and don't bust my chops because I don't have the, you know, I'm not the details, exact details. I don't have exactly, but just say roughly 5,000. So if that exists, the state of Oregon said in 2015, 850,000 Oregonians sought some sort of behavioral health treatment, therapy, support, service, modality in 2015. So when we look at that 850, so Oregon's a population of 4 million people. So just under 25% of the state sought during that year some sort of mental health, behavioral health support service or treatment. So that exists, and that I think just the largesse of how many people are interested in some of these issues. And so then look to the area of the peer support and the amount of people who are certified. The thing that's always baffled me, and one of the things that I did for 4 years in the late 90s was I ran a technical assistance project, and the same amount of money that the feds were giving TA centers to cover 5 states, etc. In 1997, I was given that amount of money to cover the state of Oregon. We didn't have anything like this digital stuff, but the state did understand the necessity of providing technical assistance and tools to help people up their game in advocacy and in consumer run projects. The thing that baffles me today, and I'm not really sure if we have a good answer for it, why isn't there a greater sense of some connected online group listserv activity that the bulk, of least that certified peers are all connected to in a mechanism? We have a couple of different listservs. One is called PeerLink, and I don't think any of those have more than 200 people, and very few of those people are active on it. And so one of the things that I keep wondering and hoping for, and you know, I'm just a advisor, I'm not the administrator, but one of the things I hope for Peer Galaxy is the utility of the supports, the services, and the connections to wellness and group and individual activities, but also and Laura, I think, spoke to it, becoming a go-to place for community connections for everybody who's interested in such things. And I think that's really needed, particularly in what we're attempting to accomplish politically. So, and then here's another question. There have been some estimates that 70 to 80% of independent websites have died, or their amount of people who have been going to them have deeply cut off in the last 5 years due to the rise of Facebook, Facebook groups, and everything being within Facebook's walled gardens. And so one of the things that I wonder is, how does a service like Peer Galaxy, which offers an awful lot, how does it hook itself up to some of these major social media pipes so it can continue to get a fresh current of people looking for information, community for community meetings and events? I don't know those answers, but I think that for the long-term success, that those hookups, those front-end hookups and redirects are going to be crucial to a vital and thriving independent website out there on the web.
And so a key is being relevant. That's a real key. So keeping the information fresh, making sure it's usable, getting the connections, the links from other organizations and other places, as many places that people can hear about it. And then I'd love to see us have, specific offerings from Peer Galaxy itself. I've been talking to several people that do online group facilitation about some ideas of what we would like to see offered for regular meetings as well. As far as Facebook, we do have some groups on there, and the calendar can also be exported to Twitter, so events could be regularly shared there. There's a possibility of some automation for the events to also maybe meet up in Facebook as well. Yeah, but there's definitely room for growth in this area.
And it sounds like you're looking for people who are savvy in that way to come on board and help. Are you offering training for people who aren't savvy but would like to do that?
Definitely. Yeah.
Cool. And
one of the things that I'm interested in knowing, so out of those 9,000 visits, do we have any ability to tell whether those people who were looking for and made those visits, whether they connected to a resource, a service, a group or meeting, or an individual peer? Because the usefulness of the utility will be, this connected me to this and this created greater wellness or greater opportunities for community that I had before. And so that tool means something maybe deeper to me than somebody just peripherally scanned it of like, oh, cool website. This is awesome information.
Yep. I see a question in the chat too. Someone inquired about finding resources like the PeerLink mailing list. Kevin, can you tell them about the PeerLink mailing list?
Well, so the PeerLink listserv, I'm not the sponsor of it, but back in 1996, when the internet was just started going, I created a listserv called Mental Health Consumer, and we had probably at the height of it, probably 270, maybe 300 people. Albeit back in the late 90s, not everybody had email, let alone computer access, but it quickly ramped up, and by the end of it, or when it was took over by another individual, we had about 275 people on it. The thing that was envious about what we had back then was we had a significant amount of all the local health press, 3 or 4 of them, particularly a gentleman named Jeff Brady at the Oregon Public Broadcasting, a guy named Chris Lidgate, who would always read and found it very interesting what was going on in the consumer and peer movement. So, and then that changed and the project went on, and ultimately the state cut the technical assistance project. And then MHAAO picked up what was left of MH Consumer and call it PeerLink. So it's a general listserv discussion about peer issues. It doesn't really have clear parameters. So we're talking about politics, we're talking about news or whatever. But initially, when we first kicked this off, we had one, and now I think we have several. But one of the things I think that would be essential is to be able to tie together one general listserv that individuals are interested in this area could connect with. And if they wanted to specialize, like in legislative activities or in telehealth activities, could find other ways to get those needs met. But one meta level communication listserv, I think, would be essential. And I don't think it doesn't exist because people don't want it. I just think people haven't particularly figured out how to scale that, and it's not within their current funding or grant to move that forward or promote that.
It looks like we have another question on the chat. It says, is there a mechanism to report and remove bad links? I don't type great, but I could help in that way if needed.
Sure, there are some tools built into the website that could be used for removing bad links or at least identifying them, but we could use any assistance. If somebody is interested, we could use their assistance to take the steps through that process.
So I was, I don't know, Laura Rose, if you were part of this, but I remember when some years back, 5 or 6 years ago, when Michael was running the consumer activities, and he got some people together and we were working on, I don't know, where we were going and some organizational stuff. And we were trying to break up into some regions and organizing regions. And do you remember that, Laura Rose?
Yes, the peer leadership network.
Yeah. And so I was trying to follow you, Kevin, as to what you were trying to say about Pure Galaxy, who, like, if you wanted a place where people could connect or agencies could connect, or you know, I don't know. So I think in some ways that's what we were trying to do with that leadership thing, kind of get people sort of connected and moving. And I'm not sure on what level that was, but is that what you were talking about, Kevin? Like trying to have sort of a hub or a movement of connection and conversation and ability to be able to, you know, communicate across the state, or, you know, have more information be flowing.
Well,
I don't know. I mean, this would be more information than just
Yeah.
that, but
Well, so one of the things that's important to point out is that over the last 15, probably maybe even 17 years, minus 2 or 3 years, Oregon has gotten a statewide networking grant from the federal government. Now that currently does not exist, and that we don't have one currently. But for over almost a decade and a half, there has been federal money to support a state networking grant. So, and what the state of Oregon, Mike Libacek, was attempting to do with his regional network was somewhat a half-formed project. It had certain ambitions, but if you looked at it, what is the necessity of a government employee out there trying to build a community network? And especially when that community network runs into issues of political advocacy and positions that state employees may or may not want to take, and issues like that. And also start to smack of a network of friends, and, you know, and what is the usefulness of it. When you looked at, there's things like when he kicked it off, we had a state networking grant. We have had for almost at least 10 years, the Oregon Consumer Survivor Network, which aspires to be a statewide networking arm of consumer survivors across the state and helping represent voices like that. Now, the challenge is, I think, what Pure Galaxy becomes is, you know, partially the people who seek it out as for a tool for information. But the other goals of, like, we want to put a piece of cheese in cyberspace and see how many, you know, cool mouses and rats that we can bring. And then some of it may, I mean, like I said, I'm just an advisor to the project. I'm not steering the ship. That's our trusted captain, Laura. But I do think one of the things that people do, the thing that I said, we're not connected digitally. We don't have a beachhead. We don't have an outpost in cyberspace that we can collect around. Now, I don't know exactly what that may or may not look like, but the opportunities to bring together one place to go to make connections with community, to meet fellow survivors, peers, consumers, and activists, I think would be a great opportunity. And then Laura also said it too, the idea maybe Peer Galaxy, just throwing it out there, maybe Peer Galaxy will have its own, you know, national peer telehealth, you know, conference every year and do it through virtuality. I don't think that what it becomes necessarily is necessarily laid down, but I do think we start this, or I start in my support of this project with thinking this is a long time coming. This is an amazing, I mean, just the work that this is needed and doesn't exist previously around just putting information together, but also in a hub where people can have community and meet like-minded others, I think is a great opportunity. So,
Well,
but I think I want to caution, but the
Go
thing again, is that when we're speaking to people in our special clubhouse language or our special handshake, and they don't understand these terms of peers or consumers or survivors, or the new one that people are tossing around, people with lived experience, how do we communicate to an uninitiated general public who may under the hood have an awful lot of identifying issues, needs, but they don't frame it in our, you know, in our particular language, and how do we introduce them to it?
I have to say, in my defense, I was new when I walked into that project. So I just want to add to that, because I actually thought at the time that, because you described it as a certain kind of project, and I didn't see it as that. So I just wanted to say that, because I didn't know any of those people when I walked into that project.
Sure.
So I was kind of new blood. So I think there were some of us that were that. So I think that kind of added to it. It lent some kind of new people.
Yeah, I wasn't criticizing or poo-pooing the idea. I was just saying its the ambition and its scope and what was hoped for, it barely got out of first gear,
Right.
due to an awful lot of other issues. And
I get
it makes
that.
sense to have 13 different regions managed by a state peer administrator, but
I get that. And it's going in a different direction now, and for a lot of different reasons. But I think, and I agree with you that this makes more sense because there's more to it, but it could also serve that idea as well. So I was just trying to clarify what you were wondering about. So because I think we need that too. I think we need communication, and we need, you know, a hub where we can all, you know, get together and communicate about our ideas and you know, whatever, not just be a place for information. So
I agree.
I mean, and we have peer apocalypse that we've had every year. That's been a huge event. And then Kevin's done a lot of work to bring together, and Sharon Keene and others, to bring together folks for Eastern Oregon and the eastern part of the state. We have a request to have another large event, maybe with Oregon Consumer Advisory Council down in Southern Oregon, in that part of the state. It's a big state. It's a lot of different geographies, and you know, so a lot of territory to cover on so many levels. I was gonna add that with the so when COVID happened, one of the people that is one of our supporters, the Peer Support Solutions, there's a gentleman named Vince Camino from California who started Support Group Central. It's an online platform, and then he's also started an app that you can get if you have an iPhone called Hey Peers. And so it's supposed to be so people can talk with multiple peers, kind of like we're talking on Zoom, and also have chats and things like that. And so he made a very special offer that reduced the point of entry price, you know, for the first year for folks due to the COVID-19. And so with that, Peer Galaxy, we signed up for that platform. We have access now to Hey Peers. So we
Wow.
can post events on there. And the other organizations, there's like 50 or so that have signed up. I mean, it's growing every day on his platform as well. But they're really good at developing sort of that community piece and offering continuity, because there's a lot of additional items around, you know, your central point are your meetings, and you have like all the functionality of having the meetings. But then when you get into being able to start these discussion forums and the chats and the other kinds of things that come along, he's working on like a matching system for peers, which is something I've also long envisioned and talked about. You know, I want to know, what are people comfortable talking about when they want to offer peer support, and what is it that we're looking for peer support about? Because so often we have like maybe a county or a provider, and they maybe hire, you know, 2, 3, 4, you know, a handful of peer supporters, but you're putting two people together that their experiences may be totally different, you know. So there's general peer support, which is wonderful, but there's also very specific experience. Like if I'm a survivor of domestic violence, or if I'm a, you know, if I have an addiction to sexual relations or something like that. I mean, it's very specific. And so how do you get the peer support that's going to help you most in your journey? I think good matching is a piece of that. We had for years, we had 7 Cups of Tea was a really nice model that they had, where you could go online, you could find out either which peers were available now, and you could kind of look at profiles and get an idea, or you could go and you could you know, decide that there was one with a profile that matched that you wanted to meet with, even though you might not be ready at this time. Maybe you have to wait till tomorrow, 2 o'clock, or Thursday or whatever. And so that was a great resource. They've made it a little more challenging for folks to access the 7 Cups of Tea over time. I think it's lost some of that initial appeal and ease of accessibility, but the model was good. And I kept thinking over and over again, why, if we have so many peers trained in Oregon, but they're not actively providing peer support, what's the opportunity that they could build their experience and do it? So with an online platform, we can grow and we can have that availability and that opportunity and have the better matching, et cetera, and more of the community action. So that's part of the larger picture for Peer Galaxy, wanting to fill that and move forward as well. And so if we have some pioneers that are interested in working on live, you know, support and meetings and things like that, or the chat aspect, it's definitely an opportunity that we have with partners and partnership. So, and you know, other things may come along over time, but I still think there's a grassroots community. And so whatever tools we need to be able to work most effectively together and be part of the movement going forward, let's make that happen.
Laura, there was a question from the chat, about a technical question about whether the software that runs the calendar is open source.
The calendar, well, I don't think it's open source. I think it's free. There's a free version that people can have with the calendar. And then there's a paid version for additional features and functionality. Great question.
Just want to piggyback on what Laura Rose is saying. Some of us who do system advocacy have always dreamed, wouldn't it be awesome if peers, certified peers in the state of Oregon, had the opportunity to be able to provide services outside of the Medicaid managed care coordinated agencies? Meaning, so for example, if you're a doula or if you're a personal support worker in the state of Oregon, that you can work independently and get reimbursed from DHS as an independent contractor. Wouldn't it be awesome someday if we marshaled enough voices within the peer workforce and set the goal of, we want to change statute so individual peers can put out their shingle for individual peer services and say, I specialize in, I'm Hispanic, the Hispanic population, or I specialize in problem gambling, or, I like working with elder folks or whatever. And you could actually go to, in the same way that you search for a therapist, you could search for a peer support specialist in a catalog, and they were all independent employees, and who you could, if you were a customer of the Oregon Health Plan, you could get services from. And the only way that gig changes, where we move towards that, is with concentrated political power and political capital. And that's why some place in cyberspace to tie in all of the interested peers who want to make this sort of political change is crucial. And something like Peer Galaxy, a landing spot for peer workforce or consumer engagement, or those seeking, meetings or groups, I think it would be fantastic if that came out of this project.
It looks like there's a question of how active PeerLink is. One person said the sign up button for PeerLink email list is no longer displayed on MHAAO or PeerLink's site. I don't know if that means it's ebbing, but that could point to an opportunity for Peer Galaxy. Another person said that there must be a sign up path for PeerLink because my friend in California recently signed up for it and now posts on it. So how active is PeerLink now, and how can people sign up for it if they want to?
Or is that an opportunity for Peer Galaxy?
Right.
So I cannot speak for MHAAO. The last time I had conversations with, they said, we support this list, but it's a community resource. Now, as far as I know, and as long as I've been active most recently, there's never been any sort of concrete discussions of how we ought to take a look at what we have in the stable, so to speak, of listservs, of communication activities, and bringing together a community conversation. One thing I would like to suggest is maybe Peer Galaxy should have a midsummer, intensive discussion about our communication needs and consumer and peers. I think that would be very useful. And we're missing opportunities because we're not talking to each other except in very siloed places. Given the amount of people that we have who are signed up to do this kind of work and are interested in this topic, so I think we're missing an opportunity.
Great point. Good ideas. One thing we haven't talked about too much is or some of the differences and challenges with the peer telehealth too. I thought we might take a little bit of time to talk about that. You mentioned that stores were shutting down. There's sort of this welcome to pod culture. Can you say a little more about that, Kevin? Oops, you might be on
Kevin?
mute or something. Are you there, Kevin?
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the things that I'd like to try to get on top of, and no one ever has a clear understanding of it, is attempting to forecast where will we be with our mental health budget in 2 years from now, 5 years from now, whatever. And I always had this nagging sense, though the revenue people always denied it, is that after this biennium, we may look at the amount of consumer debt and the amount of growth in the budget, and we may be looking for budget cuts. And so one of the things that came in was the intersection of what does it look like, what we're doing that is efficient and what we're doing that's non-efficient. And the biggest buzzword that anybody in Medicaid managed care will tell you, and it's going to lead us to the promised land, is what the administrators tell us for peer services, is value-based payments, where they suggest in the 5th year of the current contracts that exist with our 15 or 14 CCOs, 70% of their payment will be upfront in a value-based payment, in a promise of, you give us this pile of cash up front and we will provide all the services for the people under our roof. Well, now what we're looking at is consequential, significant budget cuts that we have not seen for an awful long time. And the movement has already been a movement. People don't already know this. An awful lot of things moving online to the digital world, digital shopping, digital grocery, et cetera, and now digital meetings. So some are suggesting that after the COVID scare and after this COVID stuff is over, we may see an awful lot of folks not going back to retail businesses where people may continue to work from home. And one bright thinking futurist was saying, we may move to a more pod culture where your habitat, your work life, your community, an awful lot of that takes place through initial digital or cybernetic connections. And so what does that mean for people like us who used to go to AA meetings or Hearing Voices meetings or go and provide individual peer support? What is the movement to how do you operate this sort of stuff out of your house or from a digital space? And those discussions are taking place without us often. The Oregon Health Authority even has its own technology committee. And as far as I know, I don't think there's anybody on that who identifies either as an Oregon Health Plan member or a person delivering peer services. The conversations have been going on and have not been included on that. The thing that I think about, though, is the opportunity and the credibility and authority a site like Peer Galaxy will have 6 months from now, 9 months from now, 18 months from now. And two, I imagine, and like Laura said, search engine operation and full tilt marketing has not taken place. But I imagine will be an awful lot of very, very interested players who will think it behooves us to put a link to Peer Galaxy on our website, to possibly even have, some folks trained to actually update the calendar and to move this front end to all our clinical providers to let them know that this exists because of all the resources in it. And then along with it, because once you start poking some of these big boxes or some of these larger CCOs, you find underneath the hood, there's a certain amount of complicit guilt that we've not been doing what we should be doing or what we had hoped to be doing around peer services engagement, letting people know what it is and what opportunities exist with that. And I think I think with a little bit of encouragement and education, I think this website and this project could get tremendous buy-in by the dominant system, and that's exciting. And I also think, and I don't know if Laura Rose has talked about it yet, but once other state agencies and other metropolitan areas that serve an awful lot of mental health consumers and have very active peer workforce find out about it, they'll either attempt to either emulate it or would want to expand it and extend it to their state. Like, for example, say if California came knocking on Peer Galaxy's door and said, oh my God, we have 40 million people in your state. We have 15 million people on Medicaid. We have 3 million people who are behavioral health consumers. This would be amazing. I mean, imagine trying to map out that for a state population of 40 million. But it is something that is needed. It does not exist. And so in some ways, this is certainly, a pioneer and breaking new ground. And I think when Laura is ready, I can't wait to help get out there and share the good news that this exists and how you can make it more successful.
I think there's a lot of resource guides out there, but they're usually cataloging the organization, not the offering of the online digital peer support. And keeping it web-based, obviously it's very dynamic and interactive. I also think there'll be continued advancement when it comes to activity sharing because of using common formats. So, it could become much easier to sort of automate the addition of, but it'll definitely take moderation to keep the quality of events in the list. So we talked about a couple of things possible, like the idea of badges too. Maybe like an organization that doesn't accept any money from pharmaceutical companies, that sort of thing. Maybe there's a special badge that they could have featured on their website. We're developing the taxonomy for that resource of all the peer support offerings, the individual organizations and the individuals offering it as well. And so we've had some conversation. I would love us to have more conversation around, what would be included in there and how can we make the structure expandable, extendable. For example, there's some differences in the ethics that have been around between peer fidelity for peer support for mental health versus the ethics, some of the guidelines that they have for CRM, certified recovery mentor, especially in the area of medication, whether or not it's the job of the recovery mentor to encourage the individual to stay on particular treatment plan versus, in the mental health world, it's much more about self-determination, more individual care, responsive care. I've certainly suffered the loss of quite a number of people in the community, either to complications with medication, whether it be, kidney failure, liver failure, other kinds of issues, and so, issues like that can be really important. So how do you share about that and promote the values? One of the ways is through the way that you package the information that's offered. And so wouldn't it be great to be able to search by sets of ethics that different organizations or individuals subscribe to and say that they will adhere to and promote and encourage and live by, and at some point, do we end up having any kind of a feedback system of like ratings or testimonials, those kinds of things for these individual listings as well. So there's some important decisions in the near future on how the information is packaged, what's included, how it's displayed, how it's searchable, and how to help make the most of it.
Hey, Laura.
There's a
go ahead.
question. There's somebody in the chat area wants to unmute and ask a few questions. Do we have time for that?
Sounds like Kevin had something to say too. Is it short, Kevin?
We'll just get back to it. I just wanted
Okay.
to share a little bit our discussion of our research of what states are buying independent website operators.
Okay. Yeah, let's hear from the person that has some questions.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. This is great. Thanks so much. I've been listening here with my dad. I'm really appreciating actually some of the last points that have been brought up because I think they're going in the direction of some of what I wanted to ask about. I have some, I'll try to keep this as brief as I can. Having been on the periphery of a lot of different organizations and having my own complex PTSD, of course, there's hypervigilance that kicks in. So as I'm listening to all of this, various risks and dangers come to my mind. With any good effect or good new feature, there's potential risks and ways it can backfire or have an unintended set of consequences. One thing which it sounds like you're already starting to speak to somewhat is maybe the relationship between more conventional therapists or therapy versus peer support. My concern is that, as this takes off enough, peer support might come to outcompete traditional therapy, and there may be some unintended consequences of that, which I think would be bad for all of us collectively. So that's one point. A second thing, which I think also you're sort of, some of the speakers were alluding to a bit, is the question of communities. I think if you can register, that's one thing, but well, I'll just use an example. Many years ago, I was a student leader at Portland State for a spiritual group called Growing Roots. And one of the challenges that we ran into was anyone could drop in at any time. And so it was very, in a huge place like PSU, it was really hard to build a solid foundation of members, of people who would keep showing up and keep coming back and who were there. And there wasn't, and I talked to someone who has some expertise in, building and forming communities and nonprofits long-term. And she said, yeah, it's like there's no accountability. Nobody has any skin in the game. They show up, they get what they want, and then they leave, and they might or might not come back. And so it's very hard to have accountability and to develop a sort of shared subculture. So that's a second point that I have. And then just to wrap it up, I haven't had a chance to look over the website, so I apologize. Just whether a suggestion maybe of having a manual for using Pure Galaxy, like read this first, here's some caveats to bear in mind. Of course, traditional things like disclaimers of liability, and this isn't the same as conventional therapy, but also,
Can I make a comment real quick?
can I respond after that?
Okay. Yes, definitely. I just want to say we do cover the disclaimers and things like that on the top of the calendar. There's something that lets people know, like if they're using text or whatever, or data, they could get charges from their phone or service company. And in the privacy agreement policy on the bottom of the page and the terms of use of the website, you'll find some of those things spelled out.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. I was expecting that.
And one more thing, we do have a plan to have a video that we're putting together that'll kind of walk people through, share some people's experiences, and do some of the how it works. So thank you.
Okay, great. The other thing is just that there's a tendency, especially in, as we get more populous and again with less accountability, just as a clear-cut example, a lot of things get a bad rap, like NVC, nonviolent communication. I've probably met more people who've had negative experiences of what they were told was NVC than, you get crappy teachers, you get maybe a group that doesn't jibe just right, so I think one just sort of meta level thing is just setting people's expectations and understandings that just because 2 or 3 or 10 groups use the same labels for the kind of work that they're doing, like mindfulness meditation, for instance, or NVC or whatever, doesn't mean, bear in mind, these are all just imperfect groups of people, and it's not the thing or the modality that's necessarily flawed, but people's practice of it. And that's just something I really wish that there was a broader cultural understanding, particularly in the United States, around that we don't, we don't encounter bad apples and say, oh, every apple of that variety is worthless or negative. So those are just some thoughts that I have going into sort of the meta of, what are some possible unintended consequences of an amazing, awesome resource like Pure Galaxy. Thanks. Sorry that was so long-winded. I love all of this.
Cool. Thank you. I'm glad you're so thoughtful about it. I'd love to talk further when opportunity allows. I think one of the pieces of relevance too that's on my heart and mind is that there's a lot of, well, two things I'll say kind of in loosely linked to what you were saying. One of the resources that I have personally found very helpful happens to be one of the online groups, and I struggle because I can't consistently attend because of my own health issues, my sleep schedule, the accommodations that I need, the treatments that I take and things like that. And so it is hard to have that same kind of accountability. I get that, if you don't have a group of people coming regularly necessarily all the time, but on the other hand, the flexibility is part of what works for a lot of people that otherwise might not have the flexibility. One thing that's been really helpful is this particular group offers it twice a week, once in the daytime, once in the evening. So if you're a person struggling with sleep schedule, at least you usually have a chance of hitting one or the other, not always. But I have been able to stay connected with them because the relationships developed outside of the group itself. So we stay connected in other ways, and it's been over a course of 2 or 3 years. I was also going to say, though, they're anticipating more suicide issues for people, and that's a huge topic. But with everything that's been happening with the stressors and all the other things, it's just something that they've been very aware of. Our state was asked to put together an $800,000 proposal for SAMHSA with like a 1-week turnaround. And there's emphasis coming down from the governor's office. We also finally in our state have an adult behavioral, we have a adult suicide prevention coordinator that they're planning on starting a 5-year plan with a lot of consumer input. I think the availability and accessibility of online support, online peer support, is going to be even more important with the coming cumulative result, the delayed grief. I think there's some words that describe it in particular, but I think we have a lot that the relevance is going to continue and be important in the months ahead. Thank you.
I just want to add just 2 brief feedback or points that came to mind when you were talking. One is the concern that people who that peer services will lead people not to seek clinical services. Ask anybody who understands the landscape of public peer service delivery, and the county that is head and shoulders in their planning, in their progression, in their contracts, in their valuing consumer choice is Clackamas County. And for the last 2 years, maybe 3 years, there are more people who are receiving and requesting peer services than there are clinical services. And there has not been a spike, except say probably for the last 2 months due to COVID, but previous to that, all the indicators, the metrics of calling crisis line, showing up at the jail, the ER, they can show that it has either been steady or there's been a downtick in that. A project that we worked on that I led in 2017 was to actually get in the contract of all of the mental health contractors through the CCOs, was to say you have a right here as a customer to a psychiatrist, to a case manager, to a personal care assistant if you meet the qualifications, and you have the opportunity to get peer services. You walk into the food stamp office or the adult disability services office, they'll have a pamphlet about sign up for the Oregon Health Plan. There's nothing on that says that if you meet the criteria through your, and through the rehabilitation and recovery plan through your psychiatrist or your mental health clinician, you are eligible for peer services. Nowhere does it say that on any pamphlet when you walk in the door of these big, huge organizations that serve 10,000, 5,000 mental health people. And what over and over again that we find, and it seems to be clear, is once the public mental health client or consumer is connected to what peer services is and isn't, and what the opportunity exists, most of them find that either it's an added benefit or it's the service they were particularly looking for because they've already had more therapy and enough mind pills, to kill a horse or to at least tranquilize one. So part of the challenge is, and no one in peer services says we're here to heal your trauma or that we promise you go to our Hearing Voices group and you will have an epiphany and become spiritually enlightened. And I don't think just putting a calendar together necessitates that we are giving this, a 10. But I can't imagine that Laura and her conscientiousness would put stuff in there that smacks of, exploitation, bad practice, or whatever. And then also, too, is particularly in individual peer services, every one of those who's getting paid public dollars is certified. And there's a registry and there's a process to yank their certification and make them uneligible. So, and then also too, is that we've only been doing this for 10 years and it's the trajectory is growing faster than the plans of our conventional system to accommodate us or to even tell people about that we exist because they're not prepared for the onrush of we don't have enough trained peer counselors in our area. So.
Well, thank you. I know we're just about out of time, so thank you so much. I did just want to say I put this in the chat. Laura mentioned the concerns about rise in suicide rates and people needing more support. I did put in the National Suicide Lifeline. I work for Lines for Life, which is the state chapter of the National Suicide Lifeline. I know a lot of people have not had the greatest experiences calling crisis lines, but I have heard a lot of people say that they've had better experiences where I work, and we really do everything we can to avoid calling police. I know that is sometimes a concern, but I work there. I can vouch for the services. I also included the Oregon Warm Line, so I did just want to let people know that that is a resource if they're needing to call for support. And thank you so much, Laura and Kevin, and to everyone who attended, everyone who helped plan this event. This was really great. Thank you so much for a great presentation and a great resource. And thank you everyone for coming and for such great questions and comments.
Yeah,
and I just want to say that we can stay for a little while and people can talk with each other if you want tonight. You could continue some of the conversation. I'm guessing most of you are, I know that most of you are already on Rethinking Psychiatry's email list, but if you aren't, go to Rethinking Psychiatry, but don't try to click the link I just sent because I'm missing a K. I'll retype it. Or maybe Rachel's on it or David, they're pretty quick on that. But if you sign up for our newsletter or if you sign up for our newsletter, then we'll send out something when we're starting up in the fall. We also have a Facebook page that Rachel staffs and does a beautiful, beautiful job with. So if people want to stay, feel free, we'll stay for a little bit. And I want to say to Laura and Kevin, thank you so much, not only for the presentation tonight, but for this amazing gift to the community. Thank you so, so much.
Your pleasure.
Yes, thank you. This was great. Great resource.
One of the
So
things are we cutting it off?
Well, I was just gonna turn off the record. We could everybody see each other if we want. Or Kevin, do you want this part of the recording?
No, I just would just want to pick at Laura about a discussion that we were having previously that I thought folks might find somewhat interesting.
Cool.
Yeah, I don't think this part needs to be recorded, and maybe it's best it's not. So, Laura,
Okay.
I don't know exactly
Hold on, we're trying to